diversified discussions on contemporary issues which are of social significance, social and economic significance. I think today's discourse is one of the most timely and very, very crucial discourse because everybody of us is eager to know for how long the pandemic is going to be with us. There are experts, there are people who are predicting that, till 2023, till 2024, what not. So we are all, somewhere or the other, have the same query, which is the next variant or the Omicron variant. Is it the last one, or how much are we to adjust with the new variant that is like for last 2 years is knocking our doors every now and then, and we had to adjust our lifestyle practices, sustainability, and much more. So, in order to find out the questions to these, to answer to these questions, we have organized this very, very important and crucial discourse, a Coeval discourse, which would talk about COVID-19 variant, sustainability, and management. It's a pleasure for us to have Sri Parthiban sir with us, Regional Director, ICCR Kolkata. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us as a distinguished guest. To chair, we have Dr. Dipankar Sengupta. Professor Sengupta has been partnering and supporting the institute for a long time, I would say now. And among the distinguished speakers, we have Ms. Deboshmita Sharkar from ORF Kolkata chapter. Deboshmita works on sustainability, and I'm sure she would give us some really very important inputs. And of course, we have Dr. Sri Rupa Roy with us, who's a professor from Krishnanagar Government College. She has specialized on tribal education MSME, so she also would give us her inputs on how trades and manufacturing and service units are to adjust with themselves, with the changing and the evolving characters of these variants every now and then. So it's time for us to start. I would first request Parthiban sir for his address.
Good evening, everyone. I feel extremely delighted to be a part of today's collaborative series of webinar on sustainability and management of COVID variant. I am honored to share the space with such distinguished guests. I take this opportunity to welcome Professor Dipankar Sengupta, Ms. Debosmita Sarkar, and Dr. Sri Rupa Rai, and all those invitees who are joining us. Since we know the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies has maintained a sustainable relation with RTC ICCR Kolkata through an array of activities. I am looking forward for more and more such activities to continue our relations to be even stronger. Since RTC ICCR Kolkata always welcomed the initiative focused on the development of all types of activities and ideas, I wish Institute of Social and Cultural Studies all the success for organizing this collaborative series of webinar in such a challenging situation. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much, sir. I know situations have been challenging and we have been collaborating since 2019. Given pandemic situation, of course, there was a disturbance in the continuity, but now we again have opted through this virtual mode, and we look forward to more such interesting discussion on interesting topics in coming time too. Now I would like to request Professor Dipankar Sengupta from University of Jammu. Sir, please take it over. Today's discussion, I know the topic is very serious and I'm really, really looking forward to your inputs, and know with your deliberation you will really make the platform and today's discussion, though it's a very, very important crucial topic, of very, very interesting, and would relieve and appease people from the stress and tension that they are going through. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Wankana. I think we must first give time to our two young speakers Ms. Debosmita Sarkar and Dr. Srirupa Roy. And this is entirely fitting because what is upon us is absolutely new. I mean, although some would argue that this has happened 100 years ago, this is absolutely new and you need fresh minds to deliberate on this. I will certainly weigh in much later after they have spoken in the question and answer session. But I think it is only fitting that we ask our new presenters to basically start with their presentations. So let me frame certain rules. Uh, I would request the two speakers, Debosmita first and followed by Srirupa, to speak for about 15 to 17 minutes. Thereupon, after the two presentations, we will basically put this to the floor where comments, questions, and so on and so forth will be invited and hopefully responded to. So I call upon Ms. Debosmita Sarkar to make her presentation. She is from the Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata. Again, like ISCS, this is a foundation older, which punches above its weight, which is doing a lot of good work, full of young researchers and faculty who have been contributing a lot in myriad fields. And I think it will be a pleasure to listen to somebody from the Kolkata chapter. So, Debosmita, on to you. 15 minutes, please.
Thank you, sir. Very good evening to all the discussants and participants. Now, before beginning, I would like to thank the team at Institute of Social and Cultural Studies and Indian Council for Cultural Relations for giving me the opportunity to join in on this very timely discussion today. And just to begin with, I would like to put it out very clearly that the COVID-19 pandemic has indeed been a serious blow to the economic and social spheres of our life, and any progress that we have made in these spheres over the past decades, both at the national and at the global level. Now, of course, during the first wave, countries across the world were dealing with a relatively new form of threat, and some of the developed nations, like the most developed nations of the world, who were also among the first to be hit by the novel coronavirus, had somewhat underestimated or failed to understand the impact that this was going to have on human life. By the first 3 months of 2020, however, there was a common perception or a sense of the potential health impact that this virus or the further spread of this virus could generate. And accordingly, several countries across the world went into state-imposed lockdowns, along with other measures such as social distancing norms, etc., that were introduced. This definitely helped to contain or, if put more appropriately, somewhat slow down the rate of infections. Now, however, these measures had a direct impact on the economic and social life, endangering the sustainability of any developmental progress that we had achieved so far. Now, 2 years down the line, we continue to face recurring waves of infections occurring due to newly emerging mutants of the COVID-19 virus that continue to disrupt any recovery processes from time to time. I will primarily focus my discussion on how the pandemic and any induced response to it has impacted the overarching gambit of the Sustainable Development Framework, and by doing so highlight the need for a more multidimensional, inclusive, and collective effort towards building back better in the post-pandemic world. Now, sustainable development along any one aspect or any one area is obviously contingent upon the existence of a number of conducive factors at the same time. And the pandemic has brought into focus these existing interlinkages within the framework more sharply. The health crisis and its induced responses have affected the progress made towards development from a holistic perspective. During the period of the lockdown specifically, at different points of time in different countries, the usual economic life across countries had suddenly come to a halt. And this meant supply chain disruptions, inadequate market demand, and excess capacity or dormant capacities that ultimately forced or prompted several businesses, both large and small, to shut down their operations completely or in parts. Now, besides affecting or leading to declining and negative economic growth, this had spelled out a large number of job losses. Even for those who retained their jobs or moved to other sources of employment in the vulnerable employment sector, there was an absolute decline in the average income that individuals earned. And these in turn increase their vulnerability to poverty, endangered their nutritional and food security, their ability to access basic healthcare services or education. Considering that the current crisis is a health crisis, there was obviously a definite focus towards making progress in towards vaccine development, management of COVID-19 related health outcomes, etc. But this has also meant a shift in the focus from other pressing needs in the healthcare sector. Moreover, negative impacts of the pandemic on different other aspects of individual or social life has added to other considerations in the healthcare sector. Here, I like to cite an example. India has seen a considerable or a substantial rise in the number of reported cases of domestic violence over the same period. This may be due to more number of people staying in, employment related stress, feeding into personal relationships, which has severe implications for maternal and child health outcomes in the longer run. The effects of the pandemic has also highlighted the existing economic and social inequalities that continue to plague a majority of the population across countries all over the world. Income inequality has definitely worsened in several countries over this period, with individuals engaged in low paying jobs with inadequate social security benefits facing the larger share of the brunt of job losses. And this has also, the situation with respect to wealth inequality has been even worse. This is because those same vulnerable sections of people have had to exhaust their very little savings to support their survival needs, while corporate profits have continued to grow owing to the buoyant financial and asset markets. Now, closing of schools, colleges, and universities has not only affected the overall education level outcomes of students around the world, but eventual shift to the virtual mode of teaching and learning from which we have hardly recovered till now, has highlighted the glaring digital divide that students belonging to poorer families and relatively backward regions or classes, etc., continue to face today. The digital divide also has other implications in terms of the pandemic response. It has impacted individuals' ability to access important information related to pandemic management, availability of specific healthcare facilities at times, as well as vaccinations. Moreover, much like many other economic crises, the impact of the pandemic has been unfavorably biased towards the more vulnerable groups such as women, children, and the LGBTQI community. Here again, I would like to draw an example. With respect to job losses, a higher proportion of women have lost their jobs compared to men. Even additionally, the woman's role as a primary caregiver in households has definitely led to an increased work burden and increased time poverty among the members of this group. Uh, in India, again, estimates show that qualified female healthcare workers account for almost half of the country's health force and account for a staggering 88.9% of trained nurses and midwives in the country. And these sections have been the most vulnerable to reinfections over the last 2 years of the pandemic, as they have continued their service as frontline workers. Now, while countries have been striving to recover from the negative fallouts of the pandemic, each recurring wave of infection has stalled these efforts from time to time, restricting the economies from reaching even the pre pandemic levels until now, and making prospects for further development look certainly bleak. A primary reason that has been identified by many health experts till now has led to the mutations and emergence of the variants of concerns, causing recurring waves of infections despite inoculations, is the inadequate and inequitable vaccine coverage across the nations of the world. More than 80% of the total vaccines have gone to the G20 countries, while low-income countries in Africa, among others, have received just 0.6% of the total vaccines. There is a definite need to recognize that such inequities only serve to increase the scope for the virus to evolve into newer variants and lead to subsequent waves of infections. A temporary wave of intellectual property rights to facilitate patent sharing, a global treaty for collective and coordinated pandemic response, etc., can be effective moving forward from here. Now, the current crisis should definitely be seen upon as an opportunity to recognize and acknowledge these existing challenges and bottlenecks, and frame and accelerate our collective efforts. It has no doubt emphasized the need for sustainable, affordable, and equitable services for all members of the society. At the global level, it has reinforced the need for greater multilateralism and greater public private collaborations to fight the pandemic. Besides, it has also highlighted the importance of contributing to local actions towards preparedness and resilience, local adaptation, local supply chain management and resilience, local job creation, local infrastructure planning, resilient healthcare systems, etc. Now, countries across the world also need to develop solutions, improve their monitoring capabilities, and build stronger frameworks for dealing with the multitude of risks or challenges together at once that are associated with such crises as the pandemic. And creating an enabling environment for innovation and knowledge sharing should be recognized as a need of the hour. Overall, the international community should come together to play a more active role in generating a coordinated response in partnership with national governments, civil society organizations, as well as the private sector, to steer policy designs that accelerate progress towards sustainable development. With this, let me just conclude here, and I look forward to the discussion that is to follow. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Deboshmita, for keeping to the time. Very nice, precise, coherent presentation. Thank you very much. Raises a lot of questions, but as I said, even to those who have raised their hands, questions will be taken up after the second presenter, and that happens to be Dr. Shirupa Roy of the Krishnanagar Government College. Do we have her? Yes, I think she's there on the screen.
Yes, sir, I am here.
Please, Shirupa, please start your presentation. You have 15 minutes, okay?
Okay, thank you.
And then after that, we'll take it up. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Really, thank you so much. Thanks to the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies India for providing me this opportunity today. Deboshmita has really covered so widely about the impact of the pandemic, but I will be focusing absolutely on the MSME sector. I work as an assistant professor in the Krishnanagar Government College, and by virtue of this service, I have been able to come across a number of micro units in Krishnanagar. You people may be clay doll making units of Ghurni in the Krishnanagar city itself, and particularly the Shantipur handloom cluster. What I want to emphasize, focus today is that business operations, entrepreneurship ecosystems vary across regions. That is what I had observed particularly after the lockdown, or you can say as an impact of the COVID-19. It's true that I have been working or inquiring about the MSME sector after this pandemic. And I just want to highlight about this entrepreneurial ecosystem that I have really found widely varying across region. So as I mentioned about Krishnanagar and Nodia, the Shantipur Fulia handloom cluster, which is very popular all over the world. Parallel to this, I want to compare with micro units in Purulia region. That is the typical tribal belt of our state. And I have selected 2 units here. The silk weavers, the Tasar silk weavers of Raghunathpur, and the cutlery unit of Jhalda. Also, I have inquired mask makers of the Chhau dance performers in Bagmundi region also. Just I wanted to compare between Nadia and Purulia. What I found is that, of course, following the lockdown, closure of units, as Devoshmita has mentioned, closure of units has been a general option. It was quite obvious for a number of micro units operating in whichever area they were located. But what I found is that opinions, decisions varied. In case of Shantipur, it was observed that there has been a closure of a number of looms. I asked the owners about the laborers who were working in their units, and they were not at all, really to my utter surprise, I found that they were not at all bothered about the laborers. They said that yes, the entire economy has been moving well. Of course, there has been unemployment, but majority of the laborers got employed in the agricultural sector. This is the point I want to highlight, that agriculture still remains the mainstay of our economy. We all know that there has been a good monsoon, a good agriculture, and the laborers who had been working in the looms so long had always had a supplementary, a seasonal employment in the agricultural sector, and that provided them a support even immediately after the lockdown, even when the economy was in a downturn. But when I compared this with the Purulia region, in the Raghunathpur, amongst the silk weavers, amongst the cutlery units, we know that irrespective of the regions, an informal sector always operates. These are petty farm owners, unregistered owners, and they supply, they are based on their own family labor. They supply goods and services of commercial use to these micro units, and this informal sector that mattered a lot to these micro units in the Purulia region. We all are aware about the backwardness, the underdevelopment of Purulia. Agriculture is absolutely rain-fed, monocropped, and have really very meager scope of employment in this, particularly in this area. And when I ask owners about the possibility of closure, like as it is going on now, about the presence of this Omicron and the wave that is going on, as the numbers are surging, even I inquired to them a few days back, they simply rule out the possibility of closure. It's simply their social commitment to the local communities that they will be going on with their operation. They went on insisting that they have not closed their operation even for a single day. They were compelled to reduce their wage rate. Even it had happened that they had paid 100 rupees to a family, but they went on paying. They always to the people, the social relations that mattered to them a lot. And yes, they had faced a severe downturn. I didn't inquire so much about their financial resources. They had faced huge transport cost, high cost of raw materials, delayed payments, and even when I spoke about the assistance, the various central government schemes, the moratorium benefit, the loans that were provided by the banks, unfortunately, I found them that these sectors, majority of these units were risk averse. Maybe that's the reason they do not even try for online marketing platforms also. They are compelled to go for digitization just because of GST and demonetization. Otherwise, they are absolutely risk averse. And most important is regarding the future employment. Now, this is when we speak about the sustainability perspective. We, as students of economics, we generally define sustainability as the inter and intra-generational equity. These sectors are really incapable of going for future employment. That's the different issue. But keeping the pandemic in view, what I want to stress is that in spite of all odds, these micro units, particularly in this Purulia region, I have just been able to cover Purulia and Krishnanagar. I don't know, means this is really what I would say. This is really a microscopic. It's not a study like that. I have just been able to inquire over telephone with these people. Maybe in future I will be able to broaden the study and I may get good points to discuss. But right now, what I thought important is emphasizing on their commitment for the social relations that these units have with their local communities. This is really important. So whenever we speak about sustainability, what I felt is that it should enhance policy cohesiveness. Regarding the moratorium benefit, when I asked them, why haven't you gone for it? It simply meant extra interest burden to these people. So they haven't opted for it. They haven't opted for any sort of bank access assistance. They went for private money lenders. They borrowed money at high rates. They went on requesting people so that their payments get cleared. They really had a very bad time, but in spite of odd situations, they went on going, they are going on with their operation. So this I felt is really important. It's the regional disparities. We all know that Nadia is have irrigated agriculture. Agriculturally, Nadia is really rich, whereas Purulia is just the stark opposite to Nadia. So these regional imbalances, the regional disparities are really coming up when we think about entrepreneurial ecosystem. This is important. Regional imbalances, social perspectives, regional perspectives need to be considered when we think about entrepreneurship policy making framework. So when we speak about sustainability, I think there should be a balance, there should be a coherence of policy so that these social perspectives are also taken care of. That should really make the sector improve or particularly for the future generation. Because what I feel is that there have been a number of incentives, policies, schemes, concessions. We are all aware of it. Particularly for this MSME sector, targeted for the MSME sector exclusively, but those are not percolating at the grassroots level. These are mere enlarging the opportunity set for these business owners, for these micro unit owners, but it's not getting translated to effective capabilities. Once again, if I go by the legendary Amartya Sen, I feel that it's simply the capability failure of the MSME sector. The micro units particularly who are working in the rural hinterlands, particularly in the rural hinterlands. I know that you all will be agreeing that there is a wide difference between rural MSMEs and urban MSMEs. And within rural MSMEs, once again, these regional factors, these geographical factors, topographical issues, the ecology matters a lot, which I feel should be taken care of when we frame policies. It's not mere enhancing the opportunity set. They are not coming up to their decision-making process. They are not coming up to their choices. They are risk averse. When I go on insisting that go for Amazon, go for Flipkart, these are easier. You will be getting payments immediately. They are absolutely close to it. Seriously risk averse. I feel sorry for these units. I have not been able to cover all the clusters, but it's my viewpoint. As much as I have I came across 30 to 40 such owners. They are really reeling, but they are not ready to accept any sort of government assistance. They fear in some way or other, as the future has become so unpredictable. This pandemic has made the future absolutely unpredictable. They are scared about the future, and they are going on, but they are determined that whatever be the situation, we won't be stopping our operation. Whereas in the Shantipur cluster, they are really so reluctant. They are happy with agriculture. Agriculture is really has been providing them their subsistence. I thought that definitely this is the wide ecological variation across the region that is really coming up in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which once again do not get noted by the policymakers. So there exists a virtual gap between the reality at the grassroots and the policymakers' perspective, which really is not making the government schemes so effective even during this pandemic. So this much I think is important, and the policymakers should take care of these regional imbalances. It's not between the states only, it's within the region that there are imbalances which should be taken care of if we really need to provide suitable effective support to these people so that their decision making process gets changed in a sustainable manner. So that is how I feel sustainability should be defined, taking care of the regional factors as the parameters for better sustainable development for the long run. Thank you. And I look forward for questions.
Thank you, Shiropa, for keeping to the time. Lovely presentation once more. Now, before I throw this open to questions, comments, queries, etc., let me shamelessly use my privilege as a chair to make a few comments. Now, let me start with Devoshmita's presentation. Devoshmita spoke about certain things like, intellectual property rights and how it has, in a sense, hampered, has led to vaccine inequality. I think we have to be somewhat more precise than that. To a great extent, capacities matter. For example, if you look at India, India is not yet a developed country, but because of certain legislation we undertook, 1970, etc., the Patents Act, we have the capacity to manufacture these medicines if the intellectual property is with us or we take licenses. And that's what enabled us to manufacture Covishield. We were able to manufacture it for ourselves as well as sell it to the rest of the world. And since 2004, after we signed on to the WTO, we were also able to develop Covaxin. Of course, it's another matter that you had so much innuendo charges hurled against Covaxin that by the time the WHO accepted its effectiveness, it became very, very late. But that's a separate matter altogether. The thing is the following. Even if a certain country, say Uganda, is given a TRIPS waiver, it does not have the capacity to manufacture Covishield, Pfizer, Moderna, etc., etc. And so here, manufacturing capacity is extremely important. So it's not just opening, loosening TRIPS, given the fact that you have a pandemic, it is also ramping up your production to share with the rest of the world. And this is extremely important. The point that Shirupa raised is very important. The government of India did, if you look at the complexity of the Indian economy, the kinds of players in every sectors, each sector is so diverse. So you want to have a tailor-made policy for every economic agent in an economy which is as vast as India's? It's just not possible. Now the question is, therefore, what could the government have done to take care of the problems which these economic agents faced, namely the economic agents that Shirupa examined? For example, we know that because of the extension of credit to the MSMEs, a lot of job losses were averted because, in a sense, they took on losses. But since liquidity was there, they did not have to suspend operations or throw people out of work. So, and they were able to revive production also very, very fast. But we know that was true possibly for the formal MSME, not necessarily for the informal MSME or the micro enterprises which Shri-Rupa in a sense studied. So formalization of the economy and bringing them into the digital fold is extremely important. Now, Shri-Rupa would argue that these people just don't want to come to the digital fold yet for understandable reasons. But look at the power of this digital backbone that we have. It was the JAM Trinity which enabled the government to transfer money into the Janadar accounts of hundreds of millions of Indians, thereby preventing mass-scale starvation. Now, you may talk about nutrition reports whereby people have not had their nutrition needs taken care of, but nobody died of starvation. That much grain, I think, was ensured. The delivery was ensured, and some money was also ensured. Why was this possible? It was possible because of technology, because a few years prior to this pandemic, this digital backbone, this digital infrastructure was actually very widely shared. Now, has the time come to share this digital infrastructure in a different way with a lot of our informal sector? And it may appear that the time has actually come. If these people had been on virtual platforms with access to bank credit, and more importantly, if they were comfortable with bank credit, things could have been better. Things would have been solved? Extremely unlikely. Which country has done well in a pandemic such as this? No country at all. From time to time, we hold some countries up as models. For example, it is New Zealand one day, Germany the next, France the other day, UK the next, and we see these fairy tales or these model stories crumble before our eyes within a few weeks. This has been the nature of this pandemic. It has made a lot of people extremely humble. But nonetheless, given the fact there is asymmetry in the way this operates, poor people being hit the most vulnerable being hit the most, it is surely upon us to study ways and means to come up with solutions to ensure how its impact can be minimized, particularly when it comes to the most vulnerable. When it comes to education, we know what has happened because of these online classes, and what has happened to the poor people who do not have access to, who are on the wrong side of the digital divide. We know what has happened, and the implications of this will become even more frightening, even more clear in the years ahead. These 2 years have been extremely damaging. We'll know how damaging they have been after some time. Now, with these comments, of course, my chair's comments, I invite queries. I notice that Shastika Ghoshal had her arm raised from the beginning of the presentation. So I give the floor to Shastika. Do you have a question? Unmute yourself and please make your comment, query, question, whatever. Shastika, are you with us? Okay, I mean, she's probably not with us. Anybody else, please? Anybody wants to make a query? Please use the chat box liberally. And if anybody wants to ask a question, yes, Mr. Rashid Ganguly, unmute yourself and ask the question. Mr. Ganguly, you have to unmute yourself first. There is an icon at the bottom of the screen. Click on it, you will be unmuted. It's a microphone with a cross. When you click it, the cross will go away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So one thing is that during the pandemic situation, actually what happened, this regarding this Covishield and Covaxin, Covishield came out first at the approval of the WHO. Okay, right. But if you go back to 50 years ago, this malaria, then TB, etc., this medicine took 20 to 25 years to come out with success. But here in the Covishield and Covaxin, particularly Covishield, within 1 year it has come. What has happened? Many people are infected twice, 3 times after taking Covishield. Now, there is a question that there may be some quality defects in the manufacture of this Covishield, because how these people can be infected again by taking 2 doses of medicine, that is a great question to us, because there must be some minimum time to prepare a medicine for its effectiveness. Although who has, I don't know, due to pandemic situation, it was a very emergency. That's why who gave clearance to these medicines, etc. But what happened to the general public? Many people, even I had taken 2 doses. Last dose was in the last April, March. I have been infected. Not mine. Everybody has infected after taking 2 doses. Not single time, 2, 3 times. So what is the use of bringing out this medicine at the earliest stage? I think proper examination, proper experiment was not there in this Covishield and Covaxin. It should be that now they are giving booster dose. Booster dose is the same dose as of COVID. So there is no guarantee that the people will not be infected after taking booster dose. People are getting infected 2, 3 times, not single time. That was my say. So this everything should be taken care of, particularly because the health and the education is the primary needs of every country of the world. So it has been neglected possibly, as per my version. Thank you.
I mean, before anybody comes in, Mr. Ganguly, the vaccine, if you get the vaccine, it does not mean that you're not going to get the disease. It's a preventive, but 100% prevention is not possible even after the vaccine. And you're absolutely correct that if you look at medicines, from the effort in the lab to ultimately FDA approval, Food and Drugs Authority approval in the United States, it takes something between 11 to 22 years. It does that. The fact is, they have their own particular standards. I'm not too sure what those standards are, but they have those particular standards. But this was an emergency. This was a global pandemic where they had to come out with something. Now, let us face it. Even after that, if you look at the results of the vaccinated, the severity of infection among the vaccinated seems to be less. And secondly, if you look at the severity of vaccination among the unvaccinated and incidence of disease, that seems to be higher. Now, this is early days yet. I think 2-3 years down, if we work on the vaccines, we'll probably come up with better vaccines. But yes, there is no doubt that in a perfect world, you would have had far more time to spend on these particular vaccines. But the spread of this disease was such that I think they had to come out with a vaccine very, very fast. And many of the protocols that drug approval follows were suspended in this particular case. There's no doubt about it. But then, given the exigency of the situation, I'm not too sure much could be done about it.
Okay.
I thought Swastika came in and she left. Doesn't matter. Any other questions? Okay. Deboshmita, Shirupa, Deboshmita first. Would you like to respond to any of the comments that I have made or others have made?
In response to your comment on ramping up.
Hold on.
Okay.
Mr. Ranjit Singh, I think, wants to come in out here. Mr. Ranjit Singh, please unmute yourself and please ask the question.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes. Good evening to all respected speakers. I am Ranjit Singh from Thailand, Chiang Mai, Thailand. What I am looking in this pandemic situation, we are talking about the vaccine or everything, but what I see in the news in India, mostly people are not wearing masks or taking any prevention like this one. In Thailand, I think more than 99% people, when are out of their home on the street, they wear masks. Okay, but when we looking for the people in India, they are not wearing masks. Are they much? I don't know for what reason they are not wearing, or it's the policy of some people they don't want to wear, like in America or many developed countries. They say that they will not vaccinate themselves. Are the Indian people thinking that they are not going to wear masks? And if this is happening, we are much worrying our all the native Indians there. So how can people should be educated that these types of things will not happen? Even I don't comment on any political comment, but sorry that all the elections are going on and the people's hundred thousands people are joining the rallies or in the market, or even if there are people going for shopping, really worrying about that. So can respected speaker can suggest that how can be this not happen in India? India is my country too. I am living in Thailand, but I'm just really worrying about these peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranjit Singh. Any other questions? Any other queries? Please use the chat box liberally. Or Ranjit Singh, Mr. Thank you. Deboshmita, Sirupa, Deboshmita, first, please come in and make your.
Okay, so in response to Mr. Ranjit Singh's comment, I would first like to pitch in on that. Yes, obviously, the rallies and not only the political rallies, but several festivals and other such events that have been allowed are lacks on the part of the institution or the government to allow such events to take place in the midst of a pandemic and show such reluctance. But there's also a need to understand that these malls and the economy opening up is also very crucial to the survival of a lot of people. So the government cannot really avoid it altogether. So there's also a collective responsibility on individuals or the people to take responsibility for their own health in if they want to avoid or come out of the pandemic safe and healthy. So that is definitely a concern, that there's not only in terms of lack of education, I would not say like formal education, but there's definitely a lack of awareness even among a lot of highly educated people to take charge of to respond correctly in terms of wearing mask or going out. That is definitely a concern, and that comes from this awareness is something that can be generated through government programs, obviously, but there's a overarching need to then modify the formal education as we understand it today, uh, because the system has always been at least in India, the system has always been very strict in terms of following the curriculum, but there's also a need to understand to include these learnings as well, which I think slowly and obviously with time changes have progressed, but there's a lot a long road ahead for that still. And in response to the ramping up of manufacturing capacities for vaccination, yes, that is obviously a need. Only giving an intellectual property rights waiver uh, is not the solution here. And that is why there's a need to understand that for countries which do not have the existing capacities yet, and there is this urgent need of vaccination still for those countries as well. And that is why the need for a more collective effort from the international community at large to help these countries in the immediate or the short run.
Shirupa, please.
Yeah,
share with
I
me.
absolutely agree with Deboshmita that basically it's the lack of awareness of the people. Once again, I want to focus on rural Bengal, rural, if it symbolizes at all rural India, and the MSME owners that I had discussed with, I asked them as usual that what about their sanitization process, whether they are sanitizing their factories, their units or not. They are compelling the people who are visiting them to wear masks. What about these, all this? And they were really, they were so surprised. They went on telling that it's so difficult to maintain the daily operation here. There is so much of fund crunch. Now, how can we once again go for sanitization regularly? It's impossible on their part. And regarding the mask, for the rural people, it's true for in Krishnanagar, in Nodia, and mostly in amongst the tribals in Purulia, wearing mask is impossible for them. Yes, whenever they are in the marketplace, when people force them, the police particularly, they feel scared, they go for mask. But once they are back in their own village, it's absolutely a no, a big no for them. It's true in Purulia. Even I am there in Krishnanagar. When I'm there in Krishnanagar, it's a city. It's a city. It's not the rural area like that. But there also, people feel weird when I go on telling that you need to wear mask. They are so reluctant. I don't think that education, the level of education matters. It do matter to some extent in the rural areas, but absolutely, as Devoshmita pointed out, it's the lack of awareness. They feel that whatever comes, we will be confronting it in our own way, and things go on like that. I don't know what they are doing, seeing this massive surge in this time within a few days as it is happening now. But just a few months back, also, I found people so reluctant to wear masks. This is absolutely lack of awareness. And for the unit owners, for the micro units, they feel that their financial resources won't permit them to go for regular sanitization, and it's impossible for them. That's it.
One brief comment out here. I think Southeast Asia has had these episodes before. I remember visiting Taiwan in 2002, 2003 in the aftermath of the first SARS outbreak, and a lot of people were still wearing masks. So, Southeast Asia has seen this before. I think after the second wave, which frightened the life out of a lot of people, mask wearing became more common. But as the second wave petered out, mask wearing became less common. Look, let us face it, wearing a mask in Indian conditions is not that easily done. I mean, it's an intrusion in hot weather. You do feel suffocated, and that is the kind of discipline we can't maintain for a long period of time. That there is mask fatigue; it wears off, and after some time, I don't think we can. People just say we can't take masks anymore, and it is the threat of punishment which basically forces us to wear masks than anything else. I think that is the quintessential Indianness in us that the world will have to live with, and we
Yes,
also ourselves
absolutely
will
true,
have
sir.
to live
Absolutely.
with.
Yes.
So it's a problem. I'm not too sure we can do about it.
Yes.
No, one thing that I thought was missing in all this is, what do you think the government could have done better? Concrete suggestions. Because given the third wave, the problems that Shirupa talked about will not go away.
Yes.
Under these circumstances, what do you think the government can do better so that, in a sense, there is some insulation from whatever comes? We don't know what will come. Most people are hopeful. We don't know what will come. But if it does come, then can the government do anything?
What I feel is definitely the government should be coming forward with more proactive policies, strategies that should enable the micro units to go for changes. They have become absolutely closed in their region, and the government should be coming forward. The government should come forward. Whenever I'm speaking about Amazon and Flipkart, they are scared. So it's not us, we can help them. So they need the government. The government can only provide some hand-holding service that will get them acquainted with the new global trends, and that may improve their situation. That would help them over time to bring in changes in their functioning and operation. So definitely the government should be coming forward. Sir, your
So you're on mute.
microphone. Yeah.
So would an initiative like one district, one product, growing vocal for local, do these kinds of initiatives help? I mean, can you think of a digital initiative whereby they could be aided?
Yes, sir, definitely global. Not if the government may not go by product. Going by product will really be too cumbersome to manage in the long run. But going by the local imbalances, as I am going on stressing that Purulia and Nadia, these are widely different. Go by agriculture and non-agricultural areas. I feel this is very crucial. This is very important because wherever there is agriculture, that provides a livelihood support to the people. But when you do not have a functioning, a well irrigated agricultural system, the people really are in a poor condition. So Purulia, Bankura, Jhargram, the arid region particularly, these lateritic regions, they are really in trouble much more than the irrigated agriculturally prosperous regions. So this is just broadly speaking that the government can go like this, if not district wise, at least locally like this. There can be policies, and most important what I'm telling is that regional policies need to be taken care of while framing the entrepreneurship policies at the central level, because Atmanirbhar Bharat is really good in the spirit, but it's not getting translated at the local level. So how should these local entrepreneurs, they can reap the benefits? That should be the outlook or focus of the government at the local level, and particularly the rural areas.
Devoshmita, please come in. You were raised hand.
Yes, so first and foremost, the thing that I would like to highlight with respect to the government's response is that it should not lose tempo after fighting each wave of the pandemic, thinking that it's over. So that is most important thing. It should take learning from each of the waves. For example, at the very basic level, in times of a pandemic, we clearly noted that our health infrastructure is not adequate for fighting a pandemic at this scale. And whatever was capacities were ramped up during the second wave, as soon as the wave started ebbing, those capacities were taken off, and then now they don't exist again.
What do you mean those capacities were taken off?
So there were quarantine centers that were additionally built, or temporary centers that were put up, and those were, as soon as particularly in West Bengal, I can say because I live here, there were several facilities that were actually translated into institutional quarantine centers with such facilities which can actually help people who do not need direct hospitalization or ICU hospitalization, but need some sort of institutional assistance. Now, these facilities were put up during the second wave, and as soon as we started going towards lower numbers, these facilities were taken down, thinking that, okay, we have fought the first wave.
I'm with you, but the fact is, they can be reinstituted once more. Is this such a big problem? Number one. Number two, when we say the government, and this is something you can both of you respond. When we say the government, which government are we talking about? The central government or the state government? Because remember, at the end of the day, the health is a state subject. In the first wave, the government, using its extraordinary powers, assumed the powers. But sometime in October in 2000,
send me the code. Okay.
It was in 2020 itself, it gave those powers back to the state. So just this particular clarification has to be given.
Yes, so I would suggest, like when I say government, I say this for the state government, since health is a state subject, and particularly local administration is somewhat responsible. Even if there's a national policy at the central level, the local administration is actually responsible for translating these policies effectively. So there has to be a shared responsibility here, and reinstitutionalizing is not such a big task if we have that running plan in mind. But what happens is, once the numbers start going up, we realize that we don't have the capacities. We see a lot of death numbers, and then we start reacting. So we need to be prepared for that immediate reaction. That's what I was going aiming for. And also, in terms of probably expanding the ambit of digital literacy is very much needed right now, considering that there is this large shift to the virtual world, which we are now understanding that probably this is the new normal that we are going to live with for quite some time now. So ramping up capacities for digital literacy can be a definite step that the government, both at the national level and as well as the state government, should take up.
Final word to you.
Can I add a point, sir?
Yeah, please do, Mr. Thirumaran, please do.
Thirumaran, I'm here. Sir, my point is, see, in polio, if you take a polio, once the vaccination is in our hands, we can go for a single day drive all over the country. In a single day, we cover all the 5 years, below 5 years old. Like that, the government can come forward to make production more. So that, see, in Tamil Nadu, where I'm living, in 2 days' time, we vaccinated 12 to 15 students, 90%, more than 90% we covered through schools. We went to all the schools, 9, 10, 11, 12. Sorry, not 9, 10, 11, 12. In a 2 days' time, we covered all of them. Like that, the government can come forward with a quite number of vaccinations. So that's one point. Second, that all the, like one from Thailand, insisted that, yes, we are failed in as a society. Like wearing mask is, government can enforce us, but it has to come from the awareness part. So we are, whatever we are doing in a college time, I'm working as a professor in a college, whatever we insisted on them, but they are not following in the 100% true. They're taking the mask out, they are not wearing it properly. Like that, we can go for a large awareness program. All of a sudden, this COVID going to live with us. It's an unwanted gust for us. It's going to be a third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave. It's going to be with us. So we have to educate. So wearing mask going to be the, what you can say, it has to be done for at least for 2 years or 3 years from now on. Now we have digital world. In 5 years before that, we are not carrying our cell phones when we go out of the home. But now everyone, whoever goes out of the town, they have a cell phones, one at least two, one at least. This should become as a common habitual habit that whenever we leave their home, we should carry our mask and wear it properly. So enforcement will come, may not come in some states, but we have to create a awareness, at least from the students level, from the children's level, so that next generation, we can keep them safe. Another point, what I'm trying to say the government can do is, they can easily go for a vaccination for below 12 also, 5 and above. You can go there, do vaccination camps for them. At least we can save a precious children's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thirumaran. Okay, the final word to you, Shirupa.
We have to live with this pandemic. We have to live with this pandemic. That is the stark reality. And we all are expecting a lot from the government, both from the central, the state, even at the local level. This is the truth, that the pandemic will be with us, and we have to get ourselves acquainted. We have to internalize the pandemic, and we have to get all sorts of changes necessary for that. And I feel is that this is just an eye-opener. The loopholes, the defects, the whatever we are discussing, these were there. The pandemic has simply made us realize the the loopholes that existed. So we have to be with it. We expect that the government will be proactive, but it's our responsibility. We have to manage it in our own way and to our best.
Thank you. I thank both the speakers for lovely presentations, coherent, precise, points well made, pointing us to certain areas which we generally talk about. Government policy happens to be macro, it happens to be broad, happens to be sweeping. I think certain case studies have been brought out here to tell us that certain government policies meant for a certain purpose do not work because the motivations of certain people, the technologies they work with, the mindsets they work with are different. They do not match the policies that the government sometimes enacts or implements, and as a result of which the expectations or the outcomes are not what one expected. I think we had a wonderful session, and to bring it to close, I now hand over to Konkona. Konkona, please take over.
Thank you so much to the chair, distinguished speaker, and also Sri Parthiban sir. I know it is very, very difficult to comprehend such a broad topic in 1 hour. And we had to talk. But of course, what we take back is awareness is important, is the prime most. Wearing of mask, using sanitizer, and of course revamping of policies and make a seminal approach towards all the requisite. And pandemic, we talked about negative aspect, we positive aspect, but of course we at the end we want to underline something, that yes, take back some positivity. There were loopholes, there are gaps. I think pandemic did show us the direction, and I hope we will take back some experience. Government, through policy, through revamping of infrastructure development, will actually help to bridge in or fill up those gaps and give us a better future, not us but to everyone. So, on this note, I know it is very, very difficult to comprehend, and this is why this platform has been designed and developed. And I'm sure that in future and in coming time, in coming months, we'll have more discussion on similar topics as well as some different issues. So, thank you all for being with us. I would now request Sri Krishnendu Bakshi, who's the program coordinator of ISCS. Sir, are you with us? If we can move forward towards the vote of thanks and wind up the session for today. Sri Krishnendu Bakshi, sir, are you there? Yes, sir. Over to you. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
We are thankful to both ICCR and ISCS for organizing this program, and I think it is very at proper time whenever we are facing this third phase of pandemic, and this program will aware the it's an awareness program and is very benefiting for all the participants. We are also thankful to all the audience who have participated in the programs, and also the persons, and also the all the persons who have also deliberated their valuable thoughts in this program. We are thankful to them, and we are also thankful to the technical team who have very smoothly they have operated this whole program, and we are thankful to the technical team as well. Thank you
So much. It's time for us to wind up. But again, thank you, warm wishes, and only we can pray for all of you of being safe, stay and positive. It's a testing time, it's a challenging time, but I'm sure we will sail through. Thank you, Professor Sengupta, for your valuable time and your encouragement, support. Devoshmita and Sri Rupa, thank you so much for your wonderful deliberations. We look forward to your support, encouragement, and participation in Institute's initiatives in future as well. For all the viewers that we had today, thank you so much for being with us. Without your support, ISCS couldn't have made whatever it has done today. Thank you so much again. A lot of questions have been coming. I think all the events, as usual, we do upload in our YouTube channel. So this will also be uploaded soon. So, and also to know more about us, our initiatives, our future endeavors, please do and like and subscribe our YouTube channel, ISCS India. Keep writing to us and stay safe and stay connected. Thank you. Good night.